Hello there, my name is Dan McCabe and I am the Global Engagement Associate Head here in the Faculty of Creative and Cultural Industries at the University of Portsmouth. Thank you for joining us today for our series of live talks which are being hosted to celebrate our One World Festival. And today's talk is being delivered by CWatts and NHunt, and really hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
Hello everybody and welcome to this presentation for your consideration, restoration or reinterpretation.
Consider this, you have a classic old movie that you want to bring to a new audience. Maybe you want to show it in cinema or maybe on one of the major streaming platforms. But the problem is this classic old film only exists on degraded old film, reel or cine tape, which needs to be actually kind of restored and reinterpreted.
Or the same for videotape as well, which is also a very, very old media. And that's where we're at really. So this is NHunt, Senior Teaching Fellow, Post-Production Specialist, who's upscaling his film back catalogue.
And this is CWatts, Associate Head, Global Engagement and Education Partnerships. He has research interest in preservation legacy videotape. In fact, that's you working on one of the old Avid systems.
Old Avid, look at that hair. I love that hair. I miss it. I miss it greatly.
That's also been restored and preserved for posterity.
So restoring media, film and videotape were mediums used for recording exhibition. I use the word used very carefully because they're not really used anymore. They are very fragile, and the more they age, the more vulnerable they become, not unlike us, Neil.
Indeed.
We are now faced with a situation of should we restore and rescue, and if so, how? There are so many considerations to be made once we even start that journey. So how do we do it?
Here's an example of a kind of a restoration. Restorations have been going on for a while of old classic movies. This is Holiday, a 1938 film, courtesy of Sony Pictures. And here's an example of where we've kind of cleaned up the image. But even when things survive, we're often restoring a degraded medium. So how do we know what it should have looked like in the first place? This is a 4K scan of an old 35mm print. But does it actually look how it was originally intended? And the other question is, does it even matter? There are two terms we should talk about here. One is preservation and one is restoration. Preservation is that photochemical or mechanical preservation of the original film stock or videotape. And digital restoration is where we scan, we telecine. We create high resolution scans of the original images. And then we use software and cleanup tools, which have been around for a while, to actually restore those images. And now, of course, we have AI, which is also being used to analyze images and generatively restore them. Here's some examples of some really famous restorations. So Kubrick's masterpiece, 2001. Actually, the restoration of this on film was overseen by Christopher Nolan. And then Heat, for the 20th anniversary edition, its director, Michael Mann, actually was in charge of the restoration going back to the original film scans to create that restoration. And also 1972's The Godfather. Things like the BFI and l'Immagine Ritrovata are also really kind of important organisations involved in that preservation process. But how do we know what that original intention is? Here is something which has been restored with the help of some software. This is a 1943 film called Munchausen. And with this one, none of the original kind of crew and production notes are available for us to consult. So when we restore it, what's our reference point? And what were the original decisions in going into making up this restoration?
So film really is its own thing, isn't it?
It really is, and the decisions that we're kind of talking about, you might be thinking, well, what decisions do we need to make? Things like contrast, the saturation, the film grain of that original film stock, colour timing, what we know is kind of colour grading, and all the kind of dust and scratch removal. Famous example, this is a Blu-ray version of Star Wars, the official release at the top, and at the bottom is actually a fan project where they went back to some old film scans to kind of have a look at those materials. But now we have AI as well, and AI helping us to restore old masterpieces, but it's not without controversy. We can remove grain, we can smooth out facial blemishes, we can use colour modifications, and even introduce new generative elements. But should we? Some of the couple of famous examples we have here is something like James Cameron's True Lies and Aliens, where AI restoration has been used working with the original image. But it's not just film where this is a controversy.
So film is really different to video. Film needs to be processed, and in some cases film being processed takes a long while. And this is the difference that video brought. It's a convenience in that what you record can be played back instantly, but it's, let's say it's a lesser quality of sorts. It's very flat. You have your domestic video formats, VHS, Betamax, and then you've got broadcast formats, which are very, very different. They've got higher quality, stronger signal, and they can be edited, and that's really key. So on the right-hand side there, we've got Beta SP. That was a very largely used format back in the late 90s, broadcast television. In the middle is DigiBeta, which was a beautiful format and actually has retained its quality quite well. On the left is U-matic, and U-matic is really problematic. That is the image, that's the videotape that we're most worried about in terms of it losing its quality and losing its image due to age. Some of the issues is the hardware. These are you've got two players there and a monitor, and they're very, very heavy, large, expensive machines. And there's a scarcity about them as well. There's not many of them left, and they also need to be maintained. And aside from tape decay, which is the thing we're worried about, it's the disappearing expertise. Who are the people that maintain these things? Who maintains the parts that make them work? Now, interestingly, in 2025, the University of Portsmouth School of Film, Media and Creative Technologies, we began, colleagues, myself, Neil, other colleagues and students, we began a restoration project to preserve a 40-year tape library that was made up of U-matic, VHS, DigiBeta and Beta SP. And that was for a particular very famous museum within Portsmouth, the Mary Rose. So you have the Mary Rose, which, a little bit of a history, in 1511 the Mary Rose launched. It sunk in 1554, was found in 1971 and raised in 1982. Importantly for us, we've signed a memorandum of understanding, an MOU with the Mary Rose Trust, which inspires collaboration. They're excellent people to work with, research and whatever else. And the hardware and the tapes I showed earlier were these are the machines that we use to digitize this 40-year archive as such. And these are some of the tapes as well. And again, going back to the U-matic, it's the most worried we are. U-matic is hard to, the oxide on the tapes is starting to be lost, and we're starting to lose image or whatever. And digitizing this is a race against time. Now, I'm quite proud to say this video footage here, this is U-matic, so of a diver excavating at the site of the Mary Rose. This is the first time this has been broadcast in public for 44 years. You can start to see some of the tape decay, especially on an item of the video that's just coming up now, where you'll see lots of snow, lots of dropout, and this is what happens when tape starts to fail.
Once we've digitized files as well, so once we've actually scanned that in, we have to add things to these files, including metadata. Metadata is a digital fingerprint. It contains all the technical data, such as file formats, resolution, codec, color space. But it might also contain legal rights and crew details.
But then you've got paradata, which is data about the decisions made when generating new digital assets. And it's not to be confused with provenance data, which is more about origins and history. It's about methods used as such.
And then we have the question about once we make these decisions about restoring these artifacts, are we setting those in stone? Does that mean now that restoration thing that we've created is now fixed and we can't change that? Is it reversible?
It's a term we use. Is it baked in? If it's baked in, then obviously it can't be reversed. And these are some of the decisions that we are starting to worry about. And to be fair, these have been an ongoing worry for a while.
And this, of course, is not taking into account future formats. You're watching this now, but maybe in 10 years, if we're trying to kind of watch back this file, maybe we'll be using completely different formats. So future-proofing things involves using things like the metadata, so we've got information about the file, but also the paradata about the decisions made in kind of restoring that article.
So we have a final question, and this is aimed at our audience today, in terms of future filmmakers future archivists, you know, what are the decisions that you're going to make about the films that you haven't yet made? You know, what are the decisions you're going to make about archive as such that you already have? Maybe you have it in a top drawer somewhere. How are you going to feel about someone potentially colorizing that in 50 years' time? Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed that.